The Polish industry is quite different to the music industry. It's quite different to the British industry, probably because it's slightly less sophisticated currently. It's changing, but it's still less sophisticated from a marketing point of view, and probably from a demographic point of view for the way that people consume their music. So it's not as separated as the British market is at the moment. So you don't have to be as focused with your audience, and you don't have to therefore be as focused with your marketing for advertising and so on. Radio stations aren't as genre restricted as they are in the UK. So you're kind of not as detailed. You don't need to drill down as much and go into specific detail as much as you do in the UK market. It's more difficult. I think it's more difficult for a band in Poland than it is in Britain. There are more opportunities probably in Britain because I would say that there's been a music culture in Britain since the 50s, so the opportunities for bands to play live or in any size town or village in Britain is much greater than it is in Poland. I think in Poland you're probably still restricted to playing in the cities, and the opportunities for clubs for smaller bands who don't have records out or are not really, don't have agents or managers, etc. It's far harder for them, I would have thought, to get exposure in any way. Though, we know quite a lot of bands from working in Poland. Quite a lot of bands who are still trying to get shows, and there are even bands that actually have got agreements with labels putting records out still find it difficult to get shows as well. So I'd say it's easier in Britain. I mean, from my experience when I was a kid and I was in a band, we could get shows quite easily, and that's how we were developing, record labels were developing artists. So it's easier in Britain than in Poland. I think for underground artists, the best thing to do is in the UK or in other territories that are more developed, we kind of have this thing that we call DIY. So basically, you release a record yourself. You look at pressing a single yourself. You sell them either on the internet now. It's much easier. You sell records across the internet to. You have a Facebook profile, you have Twitter, you have all these sort of YouTube channels, etc., etc. So there are more opportunities to be exposed as a DIY artist than there ever was. And so my advice would be to bands is look initially to do your own things from a DIY point of view. Use SoundCloud, use YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all these sort of things, so that Nuplays, for instance. So all these sort of things that you would be able to expose your music to the right audience for you, and I think then that helps you be able to move into the next level, which would be to look at trying to get shows, because you can maybe go to a promoter and say, look, we've got a fan base, we have 5,000 people on Facebook, we have this on YouTube, etc. So then you can show to a promoter that you've developed a fan base, and then from there you can probably begin to, from the shows, you can begin to attract A&R men from record labels, etc. I think a way of becoming popular outside of Poland is I would use Tyson Nebula as a good example. Is that they're very focused, they're very young, they're in a niche, they're very strong in that niche, they know the right people in that niche, they speak to other artists, they learn, and they're dedicated. And I think that a lot of bands these days think they need to rely on someone else to do everything for them. You know, they think that I can only do these things if I have a record label, I can only do these things if I have a manager, etc, etc. Tyson Nebula managed themselves. They were playing across Europe before they were releasing records across Europe. You know, they've developed things so far for themselves that now, for instance, they're off to India in 2 weeks to tour India. So all these things they've developed themselves, and I think if you've got dedication, you've got a bit of wherewithal, you listen to what advice other people are giving you, and you slowly build what you're doing, you can actually achieve a lot of things on your own. Then once you've got to a certain level, you look at your record label that you've signed to, and then they take things that step further for you, which we've definitely done with Tyson Nebula. I'd say, you know, the best way to get an A&R going or a record label interested in your music is there are a number of ways we source music. It's not always the best to actually send your demo via the post or turn up to an office and say I'm in a band and here's my music. You know, most of the things we sign that are either come to us from recommendation, they come to us via a manager who has signed the band and believes in the band, or we discover it in a way that maybe it's on the internet. You know, you discover it on your own. Actually turning up, sending a demo doesn't really work. But you know, so the DIY things I was speaking about earlier, I think if you do all those DIY things, then you're more likely to get noticed by a record label, and I think that's important to show that there's an idea behind what you're doing, there's a substance behind it, and there's a fan base that's already developing. Then you're more likely to get a label interested. I think UK artists are probably more worldly wise than Polish artists. I think that Polish artists probably, to an extent, there are some who come to us and they will say, I want to do things internationally, but not many. They're very, you know, a lot are satisfied with doing what they can in Poland and earning a living in Poland, whereas I think that UK artists in particular, and a number of artists, American artists, they all think about a global exposure. They're not just thinking about, you know, tomorrow I'm playing in Sheffield and Manchester and that's enough for me. They're thinking about, well, I need to be playing in Tokyo, I need to be playing in America. And UK bands actually think about this right at the start. It's not like they, you know, think that I've achieved everything I can achieve in the UK, now I should be moving somewhere else and trying to achieve it. They're thinking right from the inception of their band. They're thinking, you know, I want to play in France, I want to play in Germany, I want to go to Spain, I want to go to America. And it's definitely part of their mentality. It's in there, and I think that works well because they make music that can be consumed around the world. Obviously not all English bands do that. There are a lot of bands that sound very British and they'll probably only sell records in Britain, but a lot of them are actually making music that can be consumed in any country, hence why music is so is exported so much out of America and out of the UK. It's not just about the English language, it's also about the sound that they're creating. I think any artist, but no matter what country you're from, and you know, specifically, you have to believe in what you're doing, obviously. And I think, you know, a lot of them do. I think you've got to be working with what you believe is the best manager for you, who's doing the right things for you. And I think that you know, from a music point of view, you have to be you have to think outside the box. You have to make records that you believe are gonna work outside of Poland as well as in Poland. And it's interesting. I think there's a difficulty for Polish artists. 70, most artists that are selling substantial records here are singing in Polish. If you're singing in English in Poland, you're going to sell less records. So you either make a Polish album and you make an English album, the English obviously to export and the Polish album to sell in the territory in Poland, or you make the decision that you're going to only sing in Polish. Obviously if you do that, you're going to be restricted. You're not really going to sell that record outside, and even Polish people living in the UK won't necessarily buy that record in the UK.